practice-led research on new media storytelling. He also serves in the consultancy boards of several film festivals. So Ersan, thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah. Hello, and first of all, thanks to Stefano and Mr. Bremen for making this organization and inviting me. Yes, so Stefano already told my two positions. I'm a filmmaker and a researcher and academician at the same time. So this is a kind of a hybrid form in a I couldn't say, you got it, I think. Schizophrenic in Turkish we say it, I could not say it in English. Schizophrenic life, because I'm really divided. Being in both in the MA program and an MFA program, making the theoretical courses and the practical courses together. And in my department, I'm the only one in this track. So I can understand both sides' problems, but I cannot solve anything. Because miserably, I'm experiencing both sides. So today I will try to establish a framework. Through my experiences in the field as a filmmaker and IDOC's film designer, I started to use this word instead of a filmmaker. Filmmaking is about really filmmaking, about coming from celluloid and later with video. But now I think we are film designing most of the time. And I have to work with the designers more. That there are some new people in the team that I have to work with, and I have to learn the jargon, and I have to learn the terms and the operational procedures and all. So I think I am starting to become a film designer more than a filmmaker nowadays. And this framework today that I will be more on the conceptual side. And this will be a conceptual framework on IDOC's as research methodology and a pedagogy. Today I cannot speak. I think I'm a bit excited. Pedagogical approach and form. Indeed, in the last 3 years, I'm making pedagogical experiments with my graduate students, and I have good results indeed. But Stefano already told the things that I want to tell. It's really kind of a collaborative approach, and indeed, it's more than interdisciplinary. It needs to become a transdisciplinary approach. And we need new research methods and the new research methods for this transdisciplinary approach. And we have to learn together. I mean, no one is leading us, indeed. We will do it together. Otherwise, I mean, in the old school way, we will not go nowhere. And it's in a deeply crisis, the university and all the social sciences and humanities, and also the arts. My first question is about I will approach from a different perspective. I will talk about an IDOC idea, because when I started to make courses on kind of new media storytelling, this is the umbrella term that I use, and indeed I prefer not the word IDOC. Indeed, I prefer to use the term new media documentary, because in IDOC the connotation is on interactivity, but I think new media documentary is more than that, and interactivity is only one component, and which is a very old component. So if we will approach towards this methodological perspective, we should be open to all the components, and then we can develop a research methodology in a scientific manner and an artistic approach. And so my question in the class is always, if it's an essay filmmaking class or an interactive documentary making, indeed, I do not have that particular course, but in my essay filmmaking courses in the last 2 years, I am forcing my students, I am supporting, let me say, supporting my students or encouraging them to make interactive essay films. Because we know that it started with Chris Marker, one of the par excellence of essay filmmaking and interactivity in essay filmmaking with In Memory project in 1989. And it is really a kind of, you can even call it an IDOC, which is not indeed, because it's an I-essay, but it's an environment that shows us the methodological approach, how can it be? But what I realized is that, first of all, you have to develop an IDOC idea. Because an IDOC idea is different than a documentary idea. It should be, otherwise, why are you making an interactive documentary? Make a documentary in the conventional sense. I got it from Gilles Deleuze. Indeed, he has a very nice essay called What's the Creative Act? and he defines the idea. Indeed, he doesn't define idea, because he is coming from a Spinoza route and just accepting some terms as it is. No need to discuss idea, but idea is dedicated to a particular field. So every idea is dedicated to a particular field. So there may be a mathematical idea, or a novel idea, or a short story idea, or a physics idea, but there cannot be a general idea. So there should be an IDOC idea. That should be very particular. And the second point is that ideas have to be treated like potentials already engaged in one mode of expression or another. But there should be a mode of expression that we are familiar with. And if you start to make IDOCs, you get involved in new media as a mode of expression. New media is the mode of expression as a medium itself. You can go back to McLuhan and anything you can reference, but new media is the mode of expression, so I prefer to use the term new media documentary. And of course, within that, you have to find out the techniques. You have to learn the techniques. With these techniques, in that particular mode of expression, you generate the idea. Then it may become the new media documentary idea. Then this idea thing is so much related with the research, so I will just turn towards research and of course, research methodology. But I will start to think this research methodology, I will explore it in the new media as a mode of expression. So I'm thinking loudly, really, because this is totally new something. And if IDOCs as new media documentary is in new media mode of expression, then it is a kind of we have to find out a methodology which is nonlinear or multilinear. I mean, before, and we are so much get to make a linear research in a linear methodology. Now we can make nonlinear research or multilinear research. Yeah, I know these eyes are so. I'm so get used to these eyes looking like this, but. Just start to think. I'm just encouraging you to think in that way. I want you to be a bit open to these new ideas. Because, I mean, this is the first time that I do not feel myself to be enforced to explain and define what is IDOC. So I'm comfortable. But now I want you to think with these terms. And this research methodology should be open to participation, and it should even put the subject or the object into the position of a co-creation. I mean, here I can indeed give reference to Latour. Bruno Latour's active network theory is saying too much thing about it indeed. And the methodology that we can find is hidden in that literature a bit. And this research should be dynamic and open. This is something like a fairy tale, but it is. It should be. And this openness is so important. And we know that, I mean, I think the basic reference about this is the Umberto Eco's 1962 book, The Open Work. The Open Work already tells us so much methodologies and literature, music, and so many in the arts and in poetry. So it's time to make in documentary or new media storytelling in general. And this dynamic, open structure of the IDOCs or new media documentaries is also necessitating a methodology which is dynamic and open. And of course, Stefan already said, it's more than interdisciplinary, it's transdisciplinary. We have to learn to work with our colleagues in their disciplines and with losing the borders of the disciplines and with forgetting our titles in the disciplines. No need to those titles and those borders. We have to trespass those borders and to start to work within different disciplines. I mean, this is really hard for the traditional old school disciplinary methodologies and disciplinary way of looking to the science and art. Because I say to a sculptor to become a painter and a kind of the video artist at the same time, maybe. But I'm not saying that he is the sculptor becomes the painter and the and the video artist at the same time. No, it's not necessary. But we need something else. I think it is hidden already here, co-creation. So I think the author, the single author, should lose his or her authority. And in research, this means that the single scientist, the singular position of the scientist as a researcher making a research with his methodology or her methodology should give up that authoritarian position. So this is the summary. So, as I said, then we have to think about the techniques. What may be the techniques that we can use? Indeed, I'm not so good here. I'm still exploring. But what I think is that, first of all, we have to find out the techniques which will break the gap, void between the presentation of the performance and the experience of the performer. Just think a documentary, you have a subject, and you're bringing out the representation of that subject or object. And then, but there is the experience of that performer, that subject or object. And indeed, there is a gap here that we are all feeling. And I think here, for finding out the techniques, we should understand that this representational thinking has an insufficiency. We start to feel it in everyday life. Because the paradigm which is based on rhetorics and semiotics becomes insufficient. I do not say that. It's gone. No. I'm always open to semiotics and things. So I put a plus there. This is not a total shift, forgetting the past and all accumulation of knowledge and methodology. No, sorry. We are keeping it. But now we are opening ourselves to a side which is on the non-representational theory, which is also called affect theory, which is based on to understand affects, experiences, and performances. And when it's iDocs or new media documentary, you essentially need the performance of the viewer user. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it will be the experience of the user. It's not like a film, just you say, you give it to the projection and it flows. No, the user should make a decision to start and should find out her path through the story. Indeed, not find out, sometimes establish, construct that path. And in some works, even he or she can add some additional paths to the project. So if it becomes open. And I mean, this is a Lebow's project that he used the add pathways term there. So you can add pathways to the project. So what techniques? Montage is the basic technique we still know, but we still did not, I mean, unfortunately, montage could not get out of the cinema and could not be applied to other realms of the life. But nowadays, with the new media and new media generation, with these smart devices, everybody is making montage. They may not be consciously doing it with using the terms of montage. Maybe they do not have the conceptions, but anyway they are making montage. Whenever you make an entry on social media, you are making montage. If you're using, I mean, my daughter is using Snapchat and publishing every day a story. On Instagram, you can create stories. You're making montage. You can edit them. And even in Twitter, you are doing it. You are doing it on so different realms, especially if there is a database there which is open to collaboration, then you are making montage. So montage was a mystification or a mystic word which is kept in the esoteric field of filmmakers. I'm coming from there. But it's not a big deal anymore. Everybody can make montage. And user becomes an actor that we have to understand. And indeed, with this montage technique, he or she will realize that and he or she has to realize, yes, and understand that he or she is living with an autonomous temporality. It's not like a film that a time slot that it starts and ends in 90 minutes. How much time you will live with, you will experience that autonomy belongs to the user. So, in the methodology, we have to understand this autonomous temporality. And we have to understand also there is a new spatiality here that we have to also think about in the methodology about the spatial terms, about space. So basic categories, time and space, should be redefined. When I say should be redefined, this is so much rhetorical, and it's not a big thing that we have to do. We will do small things, humble things, but it will affect everything. And the user actor will participate, become the co-creator in the collaboration. We should be open to that. Maybe through ellipses that we always made in filmmaking. Ellipses was the basic tool and device we used in filmmaking for engaging the audience into the film. We broke down the linear flow of time and space and opened little gaps which will be filled by the audience. And we called it ellipses. And ellipses, I think, will be one of the devices in our research methodology and our practice. And conclusively, let me say that. These are big conclusions, but anyway, as the first speaker, I thought that I had the right of provocating. So this is a provocation, an agitation. And before coming here, I watched a film on Beuys, Joseph Beuys, and I was encouraged more that I can provocate. It was a nice documentary. Yes, so if we will have a new research methodology, that we should start to think users as actors within their autonomous time conception and new conception of space. These are big words, but be relaxed and let's brainstorm. I mean, we have all the day. The actor is pushed into performative engagement. So now, in a research methodology, subject is not there and apart from us, he or she can become the part of the research with a performative engagement. That's what we are trying to do in iDoc filmmaking. We always want our audience to become in a performative engagement with our work, and we can indeed spread this methodology and use it in other realms and develop new media documentary storytelling and new media documentaries. And of course, within this performative engagement, we should be open them to become. This is a becoming process of a co-writer, co-author, co-creator, co-maker, co-editor, and I couldn't find that courage to write it down, co-researcher. Yes, they can become the subject who's on the research can become the co-researcher. Last week in Ankara Film Festival, we discussed it deeply with a project which is made, an oral history project, which is made on audience. Indeed, audience is ready there in the salon, in the venue, to become the researcher himself or herself. But we still say that we are the researcher, you are the subject there. But there was a film, which is an oral history kind of a collage, and the subject in the film asked a question. All the members responded it in an interactive way. They were ready. And they had their research questions, they are in the research already, so we have to be open there. And of course, this will enable actors to express their own experiences by getting involved in the decision-making process directly. This is also a kind of a democratization, you may say, in the research realm. And of course, they will be able to express themselves in a collaborative, open research. So we have to find out an open research methodology. Thanks.
Your turn.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the heartily welcome. And it's really ideal that Akşan is speaking in front of me because I'm speaking about a bit of montage too. So thanks for the invitation. And I would start right away off with taking revenge on you and inviting you to a dance with Korsakov dispositive. And this dance is also an invitation to engage with me in fathoming the dimensions of emerging documentary practices, not only as tools, but as methods for epistemological insight and an inspiration to ponder upon the ontology of interactive documentary. In this presentation, I would like to suggest looking on current tendencies in interactive documentary practices from 3 different angles or through 3 different lenses. The lens of cinema, or the tradition of documentary film, the lens of new media, and the lens of new media ecologies. To keep my contribution as concrete as possible, I'd like to take one paradigmatic case as a test stone for interactive documentary as tool and as method, where they intersect and where there are differences. I would like to take a look at an essayistic associative Korsakov documentary, in particular Phil Hoffman's Racing Home from 2015. My main argument hereby is that currently emerging interactive documentary practices do not only strive to follow the documentary mission of representing reality, to present a creative treatment of actuality. Rather, as complex relational configurations, interactive documentaries in general bear the potential to allow different agents to experience themselves and their actions in new ways, to become agentic networks in ecological ways, and to reconsider their own being and connectedness to others. However, before taking off too fast into thin air of philosophical discourses, let's stick to the ground for a moment and let us explore the Korsakov documentary Racing Home to get a feeling for what we are talking about. Originally, Racing Home meant to become a linear documentary film on identity and belonging by the Canadian filmmaker Marion McMahon, but the project was never finished. In 1996, Marion died of cancer, leaving an apartment full of 8mm footage, sound recordings, and archival material. Apart from this media legacy, she also left boxes full of objects from vernacular culture which had become meaningful to her, either with regard to her research for the film or to her own identity-forming past. Thus, after her death, her partner Phil Hoffman found himself confronted with an enormous array of different artifacts, some of them figuring as media in the narrow sense of the word, others figuring as media in a wider sense. Being a filmmaker himself, Phil made Marion's project his own, trying to edit Marion's footage. However, he never managed to force the vast array of media into the form of a linear documentary film. In his eyes, this would have not paid due tribute to Marion's potential intentions when working on the material in the 70s. Phil's desperate search for finding a form ended when he discovered an alternative way of convening documentary experiences, Korsakov. But who could describe this journey better than Phil himself?
These words were written by Marion
Okay.
before untimely passing from cancer.
So, let's try it again.
These words were written by Marion McMahon 2 years before her untimely passing from cancer. As her partner of 13 years, I tried to finish Racing Home, but was not able to complete the project. The story she had accumulated formed a vast sea of sounds and images, relationships and ideas that I could not consolidate into a unified frame. 17 years later, through the advent of database filmmaking, I returned to her archive to discover its meanings.
That's one clip from the Korsakov documentary. And so, as we've just heard, Racing Home finally took the form of the explorative assemblage, using the potential offered by Korsakov as a complex configuration of distributed agency. So, was Korsakov the ideal tool for Phil to come to terms with Marian's filmic legacy, or was it not? To answer this question, let us maybe shortly reconsider some issues about toolness and about methodness. In the editor's introduction to New Documentary Ecologies, Nash, Hyde and Summer-Hayes argue that interactive documentary is essentially different from existing documentary, and thus calls for a re-examination of documentary theory itself in the light of an expanded realm of the real, and in the process to engage critically with the claim made on behalf of emerging documentary technologies. How are new tools changing documentary production? Are audiences engaging in new ways with documentary content? These rather rhetorical questions certainly call for a big yes and absolutely. However, referring to the statement, Adrian Miles in a recent publication poses a vital question, namely, what happens if we take a closer look at iDocs as tools? So, here is a longer quotation by Adrian Miles. I do, naively yet seriously, want to know what the tool in new tools is from the point of view of any claim that a theory may wish to make upon it. Is it something practical like a hammer? Perhaps it is closer to an instrument, such as a violin. Is there a scale of toolness in interactive documentary's concept of new tools that wanders between the hammer and the violin? Are the differences between declarative and descriptive web protocols, imperative and declarative programming languages, assembly language and machine code significant to their place as tools? Is a camera a tool? What about shots and sequences, JavaScript, writing in general, electricity? More particular, is there a new toolness, or is it more accurate to say that interactive documentary is about making new actor networks from old, recent and new things? From this question, Miles then concludes that what stands at the core of interactive documentary is most probably not a quality of a particular tool, but a consequence of the surprising messy suite of protocols, the actor network, that is produced by each interactive documentary. And this brings us to Korsakov as a paradigmatic case in how far interactive documentary certainly has the quality of toolness. However, rather as a violin than a hammer, I'd say. And it also transcends it. So, what makes a Korsakov different from linear documentary, as well as different from other factual narratives in digital media? And in how far can we say that Korsakov is not only a program, a tool to build iDocs, to promote a special purpose, but also a method to approach realities, and please mind the plural, it's not my bad English, as to approach realities as dynamic networks? Well, let's maybe start best with the rather easy part as to documentary, Korsakov, reconsidering the software and editorial interface. It is considering KDocs as a tool. At the heart, Korsakov docs consist of short linear edited video clips, so-called SNUs, smallest narrative units. They form the center of Korsakov. Each SNU has two sets of POCs, points of contact. One set in POCs and one set of out POCs. A POC in Korsakov is a set of keywords allocated to the SNU. The two sets of data, the in and the out POCs, determine the potential connections between clips. However, in contrast to usual keyword allocation in functional database with an ambiguous set of keywords, in Korsakov, one and the same keyword can be an in POC and an out keyword, as we as users are confronted with an asymmetry of keywords. And keywords in Korsakov only have a certain lifetime. Depending on the process of viewing, keywords are weighed as to their relevance for the unfolding of the documentary. This makes clips more or less likely to be presented as an option. At this point, however, already a certain quality of contingency enters the scene, and Korsakov shifts from being a tool, an easy-at-hand tool, from being more like a hammer to being more like a violin. And in the last consequence, we shift from Korsakov as a tool to Korsakov as a method. Korsakov's all-default behavior obstructs linear sequencing of clips. Neither the author is in total control of the work, nor is the user. Instead, KDocs rely on loose and ephemeral probabilities, on more or less likely connections between clips, which are obscure to the author herself due to the sheer combinatory complexity of rules, and which are hidden under the surface of the experience. Which brings us to the third dimension of Korsakov, namely their graphic interface and the possibilities of interaction. The interface design in Korsakov is minimalistic. It consists of a larger video frame displaying the momentarily active clip, it's the big one, and a limited set of smaller unanimated frames, thumbnail representations of potential following frames. It's the three smaller illustrations there. Navigation options are reduced to one very basic operation: a click on one of the small video frames, either at the end of the main video or during its display. If one clicks on a thumbnail representing a video, this clip replaces the former active video in the bigger frame, and during its runtime, new thumbnails of connected clips appear. This split-screen design serves as an interface, a Schnitt, or rather Verbindungsstelle in the most literal sense of the German word. It enables the interaction of different agents within Korsakov documentaries as complex configurations. Between producer or filmmaker who shoots and edits the single clips and adds metadata, the user who explores this material during his iterary through the database of clips, and the autopoietic life of Korsakov documentaries itself, which means the algorithms of the program and the rule sets for the display of the clips which lie beneath the surface. All three, thus to resume what we've just seen, at the heart of every Korsakov experience we have the snooze, the two sets of parks, and the interface as connection which allows the unfolding interrelation between agents. These three elements are, and here I am referring to Metzo, related to three different forms of editing. Editing the snooze, snooifying, which means adding parks or keywords, and performative editing, which means realizing one of the many virtual possible versions of the user interactant. And again, to make my point clear, the first two aspects are rather using Korsakov as a tool. The third, which brings in performative networking qualities, explores Korsakov's potential to open up unexpected experiences. To illustrate this point, I would like to come back to Racing Home and how this relates to this case. The most obvious kind of editing is certainly editing the single snooze, in which footage is selected and cut together to make the raw material for each of the short clips. Here we have a screenshot with two paradigmatic images of the two different kinds of films material with timelines between it. In the case of Racing Home, the raw material of the snooze is twice two-folded. It deals with two different themes, and it is set on two different time levels. First of all, we have the raw material shot by Marion, over 100 minutes of footage from the 1970s, plus her diary entries, scripts for the film, voice and atmospheric sound recordings, archival newsreel material of the 1940s and 1970s, and documents which fed into her research, including photographs, certificates, maps, and drawings. All this material engages with questions of race, gender, and belonging. Secondly, we have the material filmed by Phil in retrospect, reflecting Marian's approach to documentary making, as well as on his own relationship to Marian and his own notion of filmmaking. As we have seen in the short introductory excerpt, Phil had in mind to finish Marian's project for several years, but had always failed to do it in a linear way. One reason for it was certainly the vast spectrum of different material. This brings us to the second kind of editing, algorithmic editing, or the process of what we can call snowifying. It is adding metadata to each short film, including keywords, as well as designing rules for the probability of the lifespan of snooze and their spatial arrangement on the screen. This dimension is kind of hidden in Racing Home. However, it makes the third dimension possible. And the third form of editing in KDocs is a form of editing which involves the viewer, who creates an ephemerally edited version of the material. Thus, every exploration of the material is a unique engagement in a dense, heterogeneous, dynamic ecological network of different agents, to take up the notion of an actor network theory. Or, to put it in a metaphorical way, it is a vivid dance of interrelated agents in a multidimensional space. This exploration of the different layers and dimensions of editing provide answers to our initial questions. The issue of interrelation of epistemological and ontological dimensions of new documentary configurations, and the question of in how far we can speak of interactive documentaries as methods and not only as tools. Adrian Miles again describes the special potential of complex relation in interactive documentary assemblages very nicely. The dance of possible connections available between clips as Korsakov film is displayed versus that becomes present in the interface versus what thumbnails is actually selected is the programmatic choreography of Korsakov. The pleasure and sophistication of making and viewing here arise from the density of the multiple threads that emerge among these clips. Thus, Korsakov is certainly not a tool for enabling informational, didactic, interactive documentaries. Instead, it is a system that allows generative, associative patterns to emerge among its parts and agents while the work is being authored and played. The dynamics of the ephemerally unfolding experience enables and favors the performative momentum instead of the representational. This becomes especially clear when looking at Korsakov configurations through our third lens, the lens of new media ecologies, which emphasizes this performative aspect, and it brings us to the various agents' constitutive role in the realization of Korsakov. It is only through the agents' interactions with the complex configuration, their dancing together, that an interactive documentary assemblage becomes alive. So, to find a closure, this adds to the further self-reflexive dimension of Korsakov. And here, certainly, we are entering the terrain of interactive documentary as method and not only as tool. Korsakov documentaries invite the user to ponder upon the ontological dimension of the experiences he or she is making at this very moment. They invite the dancer in the system to think anew about the nature, the potential and challenges of both documentary film and interactive documentary practices. And, what is in my eyes most important, they make us aware of our condition in the post-anthropocentric, complex, interrelated media ecologies. Thanks for your attention.
So, Anna, thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. And again, another spot on key talk. Very, very, very interesting. And I really like, again, this is exactly what this workshop should be. This idea of shifting from a tool, not just a cool output for someone else's research, but like a methodology itself. And the dance is stunning, it's incredible. I really like this idea how you put together all the keywords for interactive documentary, so engagement, immersion, all together into this idea of performance of a dance. That's, I think, really kind of a great summary of all this. So we can take a question from the audience. Anyone has a question? Judith? Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, one of the things, talking to Adrian and talking to Florian about his Korsakoff model, and then I'm going to talk about this afterwards, but Donald Norman is an interface designer, and he talks about the necessity for complexity, and for us to embrace complexity in a complex world, but to do it for people to be able to understand the conceptual models that are being used. And that strikes me, one of the problems here is that most people in our society now find those models confusing. And that to me is one of our key challenges. How to create those literacies and those understandings of the conceptual models behind things like Korsakoff, so that people can use them productively.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key skills of the of our generation, of the coming generations, and also understanding the programmatic, the web-based, sub-context of the whole thing. Not to become a programmer oneself, but at least have a basic understanding of what these languages are, and that they are learnable, and to be aware of this complexity, and not to hide away or say, well, not my cup of tea, not my field of research, but that it's a kind of basic knowledge, as we know how to read and write, to know and to understand how to communicate with these programs and how these programs are communicating with us. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question? Over there?
Yeah, I've been interested in the SNU,
Yeah.
smallest narrative unit. Philosophically, it is easy to find a SNU in a language. You have an alphabet and letters, because the letters are the smallest unit to express language. In a movie, it's a bit more tricky, because you can always take a second and a tenth of a second and go ever smaller, and so where's your smallest narrative unit? And I read an article on historical alphabetization of graphics and movement, like Egyptian hieroglyphs, permitting only certain figures so that you have a certain alphabet of graphics, or in the modern world where you have a set of smileys and you're confined to express yourself in 25 smileys, so your SNU is defined. It will not be smaller than a smiley. So I was interested in a while in alphabetization of graphic and movie expression. What's your opinion on standardizing or setting up standards of SNUs that are really like SNUs that really don't allow go anywhere else smaller or different?
Well, it's rather from
Normative.
it's one of it's rather a user approach to the smallest narrative unit. It's a kind of small clip that makes a sense by its own. So it's not, if we think, for example, of Christian Metz and his syntagmatics of how we can divide film into different levels or units. I think it's too complex for this user-centered approach of the SNU. In this context, it's a filmic clip that makes sense by its own, and that can be, that makes not only sense, but which can make meaning in connection with the other SNUs. So that's what Florian had in mind when doing it. And one should say Florian comes from film studies, from making films himself, but he wanted to be as pragmatic as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. We should conclude here. So, thanks Hannah for being here. So, I know there are more questions. Hold them for later on. We are running a little bit late. There is coffee and tea waiting for us next door. You can have it there or outside. It's a beautiful day. So thanks, Anna, again, and I see you in 10-15 minutes. Okay.